The Colorado rain was a relentless, gray curtain, washing the color from the world outside the large bay window. Inside, the glow of the television was the only fight against the encroaching dusk. On the screen, a man in a sharply tailored suit was yelling, his face a mask of performative frustration. The chyron below him read, "The dating apocalypse, why can't I find a good woman?" Mark, slumped into the comforting embrace of his worn leather couch, took a long pull from his bottle of craft IPA. He wasn't really listening to the pundit's rant, he'd heard it all before. The monologues about high standards, the lists of unreasonable demands, the lament that modern women were a mystery wrapped in an enigma, sealed with a dismissive text message. "It's just not like it was for our grandparents," the pundit declared, jabbing a finger at the camera. "They knew what commitment was." Mark sighed, the sound swallowed by the spacious, yet strangely empty, open-plan living room of his Denver townhouse. At 34, he had checked all the boxes. A successful career as a software architect, a home that was the subject of envious compliments from his friends, a wardrobe free of graphic tees, and a healthy 401k. By all the metrics he'd been taught, he was a great catch. Yet, the feeling that haunted him most nights, like this one, was one of profound invisibility. His last relationship, with a vibrant graphic designer named Chloe, had ended 6 months ago. The breakup conversation was a masterpiece of ambiguity. "It's not you, Mark, it's me," she had said, her eyes glistening with a sincerity that felt like a lie. "What does that even mean?" he'd pleaded, frustration bubbling over. "Just tell me what I did wrong. I'll fix it." "You didn't do anything wrong," she'd insisted. "It's just a feeling. I need something more. More." The word echoed in the quiet of his living room. More what? More money. He made plenty. More attention. He'd texted her good morning every day, planned dates every weekend. He'd been, by his own accounting, the perfect, attentive boyfriend. The memory was a splinter in his mind, a puzzle he couldn't solve. He felt like he was speaking a language that everyone else understood except him, and they'd all decided not to give him the translation guide. Frustrated, he grabbed his laptop, the glow joining the television's light. He opened a search engine, his fingers hovering over the keys. What did he even type? Why did Chloe leave me? What do women want? It felt pathetic, desperate. Then he remembered a comment his younger sister, Sarah, had made last week when he'd vented to her. "You're looking at it like a problem to be solved, Mark," she'd said, stirring her iced coffee. "It's not a coding bug. It's a person. Maybe stop trying to figure us out and just try to listen to us. There's stuff we don't always say out loud, especially to men we're dating." The memory sparked an idea. He typed, his keystrokes deliberate, "Female psychology facts women don't want men to see." The results were a mix of dubious red pill forums and overly clinical psychology articles. But one link stood out. It was a YouTube video, its thumbnail a simple, clean image of a man and a woman seen from behind, standing apart but looking at the same horizon. The title was in a bold, clean font, "Women don't want men to see this but you should, female psychology facts." The channel name was, The Unspoken Bridge. It had a few 100,000 views, not viral, but substantial. It felt credible. He clicked play. The man on screen wasn't a yelling pundit. He was calm, probably in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a demeanor that suggested a therapist more than a guru. His name, according to the intro, was David Carter. "Gentlemen," David began, his voice a steady, reassuring baritone, "for most of my life, I felt like I was failing at relationships. I was a nice guy. I listened, I remembered birthdays, I held doors open. And I was perpetually confused. I'd hear things like, 'I need space,' or, 'The spark is gone,' and I had no idea what that truly meant. I thought I was speaking the same language, but I wasn't. I was missing the subtext, the unspoken dictionary of female emotional communication." Mark leaned forward, his beer forgotten. It was as if this stranger had reached into his mind and pulled out his own thoughts. "This video," David continued, "is not about manipulation. It's not a secret hack to get women. It's about understanding. It's about translating that in spoken language so you can build connections that are genuine, deep, and lasting. These are insights that, frankly, many women might prefer men not to be explicitly aware of, because these truths form the bedrock of their internal security evaluation. But seeing them, it will change everything." David laid out his first point, and for Mark, it was like a key turning in a lock he didn't know existed. "Fact 1, David said. It's not about the what, it's about the why. A man hears a problem and sees a nail for his hammer. His girlfriend comes home from work, stressed, and says, "My boss is micromanaging me, and Susan in accounting is driving me crazy." The man, wanting to be helpful, immediately launches into solutions. "You should go to HR about Susan," or, "Here's what you should say to your boss." And he's baffled when his girlfriend gets more upset. Why? Because he misunderstood the assignment. She wasn't presenting a problem to be solved, she was presenting an emotion to be shared. She needed to vent, to feel heard, to have her frustration validated. The solution she was seeking wasn't for the work problem, it was for her emotional state. She needed a partner who would say, "Wow, that sounds incredibly frustrating. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Tell me more." That response builds connection. The solution, response, however well-intentioned, builds a wall. The memory hit Mark like a physical blow. Chloe, coming home after a disastrous client presentation, tears of frustration in her eyes. He'd spent an hour outlining a better presentation strategy, creating a slideshow template for her. He'd been so proud of his practical help. She'd listened quietly, thanked him, and then had been distant for the rest of the night. He'd thought she was ungrateful. Now, he saw the canyon of misunderstanding that had opened between them in that moment. He wasn't her partner, he'd been her unpaid, unasked-for consultant. David moved on. Fact 2. The spark isn't magic, it's a mirror. Women are often accused of being drawn to bad boys, or of wanting a challenge. This is a superficial misunderstanding. What a confident, purpose-driven man represents is emotional stability. A man who has his own mission, his own friends, his own passions, is a man who does not need a woman to be the sole source of his validation and happiness. This is profoundly attractive. It means she can relax into the relationship, knowing she is a cherished addition to an already complete life, not a member of a rescue team for a sinking ship. The spark is the feeling of safety that comes from being with a man who is emotionally self-sufficient. When a woman says, "The spark is gone," what she often means is, "I have started to feel like your emotional caretaker, and it's exhausting." Mark thought of the last few months with Chloe. How he'd started canceling his weekly basketball game with friends if she was free. How he'd begun basing his entire weekend mood on whether she seemed happy with him. He had, without realizing it, made her the center of his universe, and the weight of that responsibility had smothered the very attraction he was trying to foster. The video was a 90-minute deep dive, and Mark watched every second, transfixed. David spoke about the difference between male and female communication styles, about the female need for emotional security being as fundamental as the male need for respect, about the concept of the mental load that women often carry in relationships, the invisible work of remembering birthdays, planning meals, and managing the social calendar. When the video ended, Mark felt a strange mixture of shame and exhilaration. He had been getting it so wrong for so long. But for the first time, he had a map. He wasn't just stumbling in the dark anymore. The next day, he called his sister. "Sarah, I need to ask you a favor. And I need you to be brutally honest." "Uh-oh. Did you buy another ridiculously expensive coffee maker?" "No," he laughed. "I want you to introduce me to your friend, Emily. The one you're always hiking with." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Emily, Mark, she's intense. She's smart, she's fiercely independent. I love her, but I'm not sure she's your type. You tend to go for the less challenging ones." "Exactly," Mark said, a new determination in his voice. "I don't want easy, I want real." A week later, he found himself at a trendy brewery, waiting for Emily. He was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness. It wasn't the desperate anxiety to impress, it was the respectful tension of stepping into a new arena. Emily arrived, and she was everything Sarah had said. She had a direct gaze, a firm handshake, and an air of quiet competence. She was a landscape architect, and she spoke about her work with a passion that was immediately captivating. The old Mark would have immediately tried to find common ground, to steer the conversation to himself to prove his worth. The new Mark, armed with his new understanding, did something different. He asked questions. And he listened. "So, what's the most challenging part of designing a public park?" he asked. Her eyes lit up. "Getting the city planners to understand that it's not just about putting grass and trees in a square. It's about creating an experience, a flow. It's about anticipating how people will move and feel in that space." He didn't offer a solution. He didn't tell her about a project management software that could help. He just nodded and said, "That sounds incredibly complex. It's like you're a psychologist for public spaces. It was a simple observation, but he saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, followed by a genuine smile. Yes, that's exactly it. Later, she asked him about his work. He talked about software architecture, but instead of listing his accomplishments, he talked about the challenge of creating elegant, simple systems out of complex chaos. It's satisfying, he said, but it's not what defines me. My real passion is restoring old motorcycles. There's something meditative about taking a piece of broken history and making it breathe again. He was demonstrating, without saying it, that he had a life and a passion outside of his job. He was a man with a mission, however small. The date lasted 3 hours. They talked about everything from their favorite books to their complicated families. When she mentioned a difficult conversation she'd had with her mother, he didn't try to fix it. He said, "That sounds really tough. It's hard when the people we love the most can also frustrate us the most." She looked at him, her head slightly tilted. "You're a really good listener, Mark. It's rare." He walked her to her car, and they made plans to go hiking the following weekend. As he drove home, he didn't feel the giddy, unstable high of a successful date. He felt a deep, solid sense of calm. He had connected with another human being, authentically. He had seen her, and he felt, for the first time, that he had been seen in return. The hike was even better. He let her lead, respecting her obvious expertise on the trail. They stopped at a breathtaking overlook, the city of Denver spread out below them like a glittering map. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the hawks circle on the thermals. "You know," Emily said, her voice soft, "I was a little wary of going out with Sarah's brother." "Oh," Mark said, turning to look at her. "Yeah. She described you as a great guy, but successful, stable, a little predictable." "No offense. None taken," he smiled. "I probably was. But you're not," she said, meeting his gaze. "You're present. Most guys I meet are either trying to sell me a version of themselves or they're so eager to please they become a blank slate. You're just here." It's refreshing. They continued dating, and Mark consciously applied the principles he was learning. He maintained his own life, his basketball games, his motorcycle projects, his quiet nights alone. He didn't flood her with texts all day. When they were together, he was fully there. When she shared a problem, he fought his programming to solve it and instead focused on validating her feelings. It wasn't always easy. Old habits died hard. One evening, she was stressed about a big presentation to a demanding client. "I just don't know if my designs are what they're looking for," she fretted, pacing his living room. "What if they hate it?" The old Mark would have said, "Of course they won't hate it, your work is amazing, or worse, here's how you should present it." The new Mark took a breath. He walked over to her, took her hands, and said, "It's okay to be nervous. This is a big deal. And whatever happens, you're an incredible architect, and you've put your heart into this. I'm proud of you for taking on such a challenging project." She stopped pacing, her shoulders relaxing. She leaned into him, resting her head on his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." In that moment, he understood the power of what David had taught him. He hadn't solved her problem, but he had given her the strength to solve it herself. He had been her sanctuary, not her mechanic. A few months in, they faced their first real test. Mark's company went through a sudden, brutal round of layoffs. His entire department was restructured, and he found himself, for the first time in his adult life, unemployed. The old insecurities came rushing back. He felt like a failure, his identity as a provider shattered. The first night, he fell back into old patterns. When Emily came over, he was morose, withdrawn. "I'll figure it out," he said, his tone clipped. "Don't worry about me." He was pushing her away, preempting the rejection he felt he deserved. But Emily didn't take the bait. She didn't try to cheer him up with platitudes or bombard him with job search advice. She simply made dinner, put a plate in front of him, and said, "This sucks. It's unfair and it sucks. I'm here for you." For the next week, she gave him space but made her presence felt. A funny text in the middle of the day. Coming over to watch a movie and just be with him. She was demonstrating the very emotional security he had worked so hard to show her. One evening, as they were washing dishes, he finally broke. "I'm terrified, he admitted, the vulnerability raw in his voice. "I feel like I've lost everything I built." She put down the towel and turned to him. "Mark, you haven't lost anything. You didn't get laid off because you were bad at your job. The company failed you. You still have your mind, your skills, and you still have me. I'm not with you for your job title. I'm with you for the man who listens, who restores beautiful old machines, and who makes me feel safe and understood. That man is right here. Her words were an anchor in his storm. They weren't just comfort. They were a reflection of the man he had become, a man whose value was intrinsic, not tied to a paycheck. Her unwavering support, rooted in the genuine connection they had built, gave him the strength to start over. He began networking, taking on freelance projects, and discovered a passion for teaching coding that he never knew he had. One Saturday, about a year after they first met, they went back to the same overlook where they had hiked on their second date. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. As they stood there, hand in hand, Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Emily," he said, turning to her. "When I met you, I was a man who thought he had all the answers but didn't understand the questions. You've taught me more about partnership and strength than I ever thought possible." He reached into his pocket, his heart pounding not with fear, but with a quiet, absolute certainty. He got down on one knee. "My life is infinitely better with you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times, yes. As they held each other, the city gleaming below them, Mark thought back to that rainy night, to the lonely man on the couch watching a YouTube video. The title had been provocative, almost sinister. Women don't want men to see this. But he now knew the real, beautiful truth. It wasn't about a secret weapon or a hidden vulnerability to be exploited. It was a key to a door women had been standing in front of for generations, hoping a man would be perceptive enough, caring enough, and secure enough to find it himself. The secrets of female psychology weren't tricks. They were an invitation to step beyond superficial transactions and into the deep, resonant, and powerful space of true emotional partnership. They weren't secrets women wanted to keep hidden out of malice. They were treasures they longed for men to discover, so they wouldn't have to navigate the complexities of love and life alone. Women didn't want men to see the map because they wanted men to be lost. They wanted men to see it so they could finally, after so long, find their way to them. And Mark, holding the woman he loved, knew he was finally, truly, home.